Oh, hey, come on. Hey, let's go in and talk about pocket knives. Today's project is a knife that was sent in by Milo in Houston, Texas. This is the second knife that he sent me. We have a beautiful Remington bullet trapper. This is the big, giant, oversized trapper. Gorgeous bone handles on this thing. The only problem with it is our blades are not centered. So we're going to see if we can fix that. We'll start with the easy steps, move on up from there. Thanks for joining me, guys. Let's have fun with this knife. All right. First, we'll try inserting another knife, closing this to try to force that blade over. The purpose of that is to try to bend the pin just enough to straighten that blade. All right, so get that in there. We'll close it. Of course, temporarily while you're looking at it, it moves it over a little further than you felt like you needed. But again, the purpose is to bend that pin. Okay, and it's not doing it. Pins are very heavy on this knife, so I didn't have a lot of hope of that working, but I tried a third time just to see, but so far we're just not doing it. Okay. No, nope. It's not hitting the liner, but it's not over as where it needs to be either. So, all right, well, we're going to take this knife apart, potentially repin it, because I'm betting that one or both of these pins are bent, which would one of the things that can cause that. There are other things, but that's the most likely culprit. So we'll start taking her apart. I'll begin by inserting a razor blade into the knife to cut the pins. I have to keep the blades open on this knife while I hammer on it, because with the blades closed, the knife is wider than the razor blade. I do love these jumbo trappers. They're beautiful, but man, they can be trouble. Unfortunately, the razor blade keeps moving around and it just will not cut through that pin. These pins are larger than typical, and as the blade moves around, the edge of the vise is starting to catch on the knife handle. So the problem I was running into with that is trying to drive down the razor blade. It wouldn't hold still. It's beginning to just separate this instead of cutting the pin. These pins are a little bit thicker, and I couldn't keep the knife straight due to having the blades open. Had to have the blades open because with the blades closed, the knife was wider than the razor blade. So that's just not going to work. I stopped before I broke anything, but if I had continued, I think it would have broken the bone handles, and we just don't want that. So we will drill these pins out. I am seriously trying to take my time while drilling these pins. I've had drills slip off before in the past and damage the handles or bolsters that I was working on, so I know that I have to take extra care to prevent that from happening here with this knife. I am seriously trying to take my time while drilling these pins. I've had drills slip off before in the past and damage the handles or bolsters that I was working on, so I know that I have to take extra care to prevent that from happening here with this knife. Phew, I finally removed that center pin. Now the tube at the back can come out fairly easily with the spring tension removed. It was holding the back end of the knife together just like a pin. I made several efforts to pry this pivot pin loose, but it's as stubborn as a red-headed woman. Just take my word for that. So I'll spend quite a lot of time here drilling and prying on this knife and even trying once again to cut the pin with a razor blade. Persistence finally does pay off. I apologize for continually moving the knife out of the frame as I work. When things get difficult, I begin to forget about the cameras altogether. All three liners had some rough spots near the pinholes. I don't think they were originally like that, so it might have happened when I did all of this work to take the knife apart. Whatever the cause, I'm going to smooth them out now with a 400 grit sanding belt and then inspect them closely to make sure every piece is smooth and flat. Here, I'm doing a quick test fit with new pins, just to see if I can find a flaw in any of these parts. I've noticed that the hole in the main blade seems to be smaller on one side than it is on the other. I'm checking both blades with a drill bit to see if the hole truly is off or if it's just an illusion. I check the secondary blade first, then move on to the main blade. The drill bit goes through, but it does feel different on this main blade, so I will re-drill the hole or kind of ream it out with that drill bit to make sure that it's correct, being sure to hold it as straight as I can. Next, I'm checking the pivot holes on each handle. I've never seen one that was drilled incorrectly from the factory, but I've drilled some myself that were off, so I suppose it can be possible, because it did make the blade sit off center in mine. These appear to be fine, but this is just part of the diagnosis. I'm trying to inspect each and every part to find the cause of this blade misalignment. Back to the test fit. Let's see if these blades will sit straight now. This little vise is not strong enough for tough jobs, but it really is handy for pocket knives to be able to tilt and pivot at different angles while you work. This is the moment I can see the blade problem is still there. Even open, that main blade is sitting over to one side. When I close the blade, it sits exactly where it did before I started. I've made no difference in this knife yet. Either that hole in the main blade is still off somehow that I just can't see, or the entire blade was ground off center from the factory. I'm going to try crinking this blade. Crinking is where you use a hammer to try to bend the blade or sometimes the pivot pin to cause that blade to sit straight again. It's worked once or twice for me in the past, but more often it's resulted in broken blades. So I'm very hesitant and gentle when I try this. But I am unsuccessful at crinking this blade. The blade and the pin are both so heavy and thick that these light hammer blows are just not affecting them at all, and I dare not strike it any harder. I don't have a replacement blade if I were to break this one. Then I noticed something wonderful. As I put pressure on this long pivot pin, the blade moves. And I began to remember the first knife repair I ever did where I replaced a bent pin and thought, what if I were to bend this pin on purpose in order to hold the blade closer to the center again? Could that possibly work? Blessedly, it does work. After experimenting a little off camera, I found that if I bent the marked side of the pin upward toward the end of the knife, it held the blade centered nicely. I began pinning the pins to hold them in place so they wouldn't move before I remembered to restart the cameras. So now at this point, I'm ready for the slackener and the final peening. By the time I did the final analysis on this video later, the blade was straighter than before, but it still seemed to be off a little. But later, after working the blade some more and oiling it well, it began falling into place almost perfectly. I believe that Milo is going to be happy with the results of this repair. I don't actually peen the tube at the end, but I do flare it on the ends just slightly using my center punch. It does not need much. I installed a new belt on my sander in order to smooth these pivot pins against the bolsters. They didn't disappear as well as I'd hoped though. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I've gotten a lot of questions about these old worn polishing pads that I've been using, but today it's time to replace it with a standard polishing wheel. I will dispose of the old one properly. The new one will throw off a lot of loose threads until it's well broken in, but it polishes much better than the ones I've been using. it's an overcast day, so you might not be able to see anything on this one. I like to get them in the bright sunlight when I can, but I think it turned out pretty good. Again, everything went back together on the knife well. The pins still show. They did when I started on the knife, so there's something, I don't know, something about those bolsters, I guess. But everything works well, looks good. The blades are not perfectly centered, but they're a lot better than they were. They're pretty close. At least it's not touching the liners now on either side. I'll get in a little closer and see if you can see that. But I think it's just going to be out of focus the more I try. Anyway, but I am satisfied with it. I think Milo will be. I certainly hope so. We'll get this back to him and find out. Thank you for joining me for this voyage, and I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless you. Bye.